Hey, NC.
Hey, NC.
How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Oh, not too bad. Getting ready for Monday. It's coming right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? You get ready for Monday?
Yep.
As ready as you can be, huh?
Yep. Ready.
So we have a really cool interview we had.
Yeah, Jaki Shelton Green.
Mm-hmm.
She is a local poet. She is very inspiring to me personally. And she lives in our area, which is, and her writing style is just really connecting to me.
She's in the let me try that again. The North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame. Obviously, yeah. I am not.
She was the first Piedmont Poet Laureate. So, yeah.
And she does, now, can you tell me a little bit about Sister Write? I don't really know much about it.
Well, you'll hear it in the podcast.
Oh, well, there we go.
So she started this writing collective with women, by women. She kind of finds a space, creates space, and it's like a retreat where women can write. You can be a writer, a non-writer, an aspiring writer. And she's done them kind of locally out at Ocracoke. She's done them one in Lynchburg. She's starting some pop-up ones, like just a day kind of retreat. She's starting that soon, and then she just landed a space in Morocco, which is pretty exciting. So you'll hear her talk about that.
Awesome.
And how it came to be.
So anything North Carolina related you want to chat up?
Why don't you start first?
Oh, I was just going to say there have been a couple of interesting cases about gerrymandering, and both partisan and racial, and I guess the partisan stuff, which seems to be part of the nationwide effort of whether or not it's viewed as silencing political speech because it's getting so finely tuned as to, I guess cut these really precise maps to get the results you want. Whether or not that's going to be considered partisan gerrymandering, that's on hold, unfortunately. But hopefully we'll see more action on that in the forthcoming year. Yeah,
and speaking of which, I just went to a Orange County Democrat fundraiser where Anita Earls spoke, and she is the Democrat candidate for the Supreme Court. State Supreme Court spot that is coming up for a re-election, I guess, because Barbara Jackson holds it now. She's the Republican. Yeah. But, Anita Earls is awesome.
Cool.
We really hope to have her on the podcast. She is a lawyer. She works with the Southern Justice Coalition. She's a civil rights lawyer. She worked on the voter ID lawsuits, right? So she knows very well about gerrymandering, and we need her in place.
Excellent.
To make a difference.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, folks, and enjoy our interview with Jaki Shelton Green.
Hey, Jaki.
Good morning. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm great.
I'm so
Happy
glad
to
you're
see you.
here.
Yes.
Yes.
And it's Jaki Skelton? Shelton, okay.
S-H.
Green.
Shelton Green.
Yes.
Yeah.
For some reason, I kept thinking skeleton. I don't know why.
I could do skeleton.
That sounds kind of interesting, because I was going to say, where does a name like skeleton come along?
I know.
Because I was saying Skelton.
Skeleton.
Well,
so you were born and bred in Orange County, right?
I was born in Martino's, the pizza place.
Really?
What?
Martino's.
In the building?
I've eaten there before.
Well, I wasn't born in the pizza pan. But that was the Mebane Clinic.
Wow,
And
really?
Dr. Bullard was then the doctor who took care of everybody.
Did he?
He died in the 70s, I think the late 70s or early. I think the late 70s.
Okay.
But he delivered me. He delivered my brother.
Wow.
He made house calls. I have vivid memories of him being in my house as a child when I was sick and coming to take care of my grandmother or the treat of a flu for a relative. He went to everybody's house.
That's amazing.
Yeah, he was the country doctor.
Wow.
So I was born in Mebane, and I was raised in Eflin on Highway 70.
Yeah.
Yeah, attended Orange County Public Schools for a little while, and I was kicked out of Orange High School at the advent of desegregation for organizing a walkout.
Look at
Oh.
Yeah,
You
so
go.
I landed
That's amazing.
at a independent private boarding school in Bucks County, Quaker boarding school in Bucks County, Pennsylvania.
you. Wow. How was the
Quakers.
Quaker school? What was that like?
Now I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
You know, I was too young to really have an appreciation of where I had landed. It was the late 60s. We're talking about Cambodia, the Vietnam War. The Civil Rights Movement was at its pinnacle with desegregation happening all over the country. Black Panther Party was peaking. There was a revival of African American peaking in music and literature. I mean, just like the Harlem Renaissance.
Wow.
There was that surge of creativity that was coming out of the movement. You know, protest songs and Sonia Sanchez and Amiri Baraka and
So
all
did
of these
your
people.
folks relocate you up there to get you out of trouble?
So I was kicked out of school, and it's a long story, and I won't go into all of that. But the short of it is that I received a scholarship
Oh, okay.
I had a full scholarship to, actually I had several choices for schools, and I knew I wanted to be in a co-ed school. And I'd never been to Pennsylvania. I didn't know who Quakers were, what they were, what they believed, or anything. But I landed there, and in terms of appreciation, now I truly appreciate the experience. For the first time in my life, I was around all kinds of people, all kinds of young people, you know, kids my age from all over the world, and I maintain a relationship, a good sense of community and friendships with many of the people in my class. We were a rowdy bunch. We were.
And what was Burke County?
Bucks County.
Bucks
So
County.
the George School, Newtown,
Uh-huh.
Newtown, Pennsylvania. Julian Bond attended there.
Wow.
Kathleen Cleaver,
Oh, holy cow.
Eldridge Cleaver's wife,
Yeah.
was a graduate. A lot of Hal Holbrook's son was there when I was there.
Really?
Senator Jacob Javits' daughter was there when I was there. Gene Kuhnhardt, whose dad was if I'm saying this right, the editor of Look or Life magazine.
Wow.
So,
You
yeah.
get to rub shoulders with all kinds of people.
Yeah. And a lot of these people have gone on to become judges themselves and amazing social activists and writers.
Right. So were you always writing even when you were younger, before you went?
Yeah.
Okay.
I started writing as a child. I was fascinated with story, and you know, the South is an oral culture. I mean, people tell stories.
Yeah.
And my Sundays after church were, you know, after church we went to dinner at an elder's house, and you sat on the porch, and people just told stories.
Yeah.
Or there were stories going on at the dining room table.
Yeah.
And I was fidgety in church. I did not like to be still, and I wanted to see everything and look around and check everybody out. And my grandmother would give me these little tiny tablets, you know, these little itsy bitsy tablets. And I would sit there and write my books. And then I continued to do this when I got older, when I was really paying attention, and I would write poems about the women's hats and certain people in the church were interesting characters within themselves, and you know, I'd just be kind of fascinated by how they showed up in their worlds, and you know.
So when you wrote, did it just naturally come out as poetry, or did you write different?
Well,
style?
first of all, when I was very young, I was just like making big letters on papers, calling it my little
Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
you know.
Right.
But when I became a juvenile,
Uh-huh.
and I still was fidgety at church, I would sneak in a notepad or my little diaries, and I would write. I'd write stories or poems. So yeah, I've been writing poetry in the form of poetry, a poetic form, since I was very young.
Wow. Do you remember, like the first poem that you ever read by someone else, or that influenced you and sparked you and said, "This speaks to me"?
Of course, I was taught a lot of poetry as a child. I think as a young child, it was Shakespeare. As I got older and started thinking about what it means to write and what it means to be read, I was really hungry to find the voices that represented me as a person of color.
Yeah.
And I think it was my grandmother giving me, my brain just shut down. I'll have to come back to this.
Okay.
My grandmother giving me, I can't get her name out, a collection of poems by Phyllis Wheatley.
Okay.
A collection of poetry by Phyllis Wheatley. And my grandmother had little poem books by George Moses Horton from the 1800s that were being given away when she would go to the African Methodist African Methodist Episcopal Church conferences. His little books were being handed out, and they were all over our house. I'm sure now they'd be worth a ton of money.
Yeah, everybody's got to save everything now from their
Yeah.
childhood so they can retire on it.
But those writings spoke to me, but all writing spoke to me. That's just it. And it wasn't just poetry. I loved language. And I love the artistry of language. And I was fascinated with how people told stories, how people wove stories, how they made the stories magical, how, sometimes I think, how did you put that in his mouth to say that? Like how does a writer put the words inside of a character? Like what's that anatomy about? How do you actually build a character and like a robot, like stuff the words in there? So I was fascinated with just the whole architecture, the building of story and characters. So story influences a lot of my poetry. I believe that all of my poetry and most poetry that I read is located in the agency of story. That's where we pluck them out from.
Yeah.
There's the long story, and then if you dig, you find your poem.
Okay.
What I love about your writing is how you like call onto the spirits, and they almost help guide you to write. And it's maternal spirits, and you really have a voice for women, which is I don't know. I connect to it in a way that I don't connect so much to other writers. So I guess. It sounds like your grandmother influenced you a lot and had was a strong force in your life. What, I guess, inspired you to keep bringing those ancestry spirits into your work?
Well, first of all, thank you for those tender words. They mean a lot to me. And yes, I think my voice has always been decidedly female, purposefully female. I've always thought about my writing having to have a function when I'm writing it. I'm not so much concerned with craft. And there's a lot of confusion going on now about whose craft and whose craft is the craft, and and who are the gatekeepers around voices. And I continually remind myself that I don't write to be published. I don't write for outside validation, though it means a lot. But I write because I have to write. I write because it's as essential to me as breath. It's my yoga. That's my writing. But I do tap deep into an ancestral space. And sometimes I try not to. I try okay, can I write something else? But they won't shut up.
I love it.
They won't shut up.
love
So you're
and
compelled.
Yeah, so the power of utterance, what it means to utter, what it means to tell. When I think about many groups of people whose voices have been marginalized, have been silenced, have been erased, you know, and I feel called to keep those voices in the mix, you know.
Yeah.
When I was accepting the North Carolina Literary Hall of Fame, I knew my grandmother and all the elders, the ancestors, they were standing right there with me saying, "Go girl, you got this. It's yours, take it." I knew they were there. No one could see them,
Yeah.
but they were right there. And having the ability to tap into that comes with its own responsibilities, because I always want to feel like I'm authentically representing them or authentically allowing them to use me as a vessel, as a conduit, you know. I think there's still messages from different eras that need to be reconciled, that need to have a space in the place, this new place that we're in. And it's not such a new place for the ancestors.
Right.
They're like, "Oh, we've been there before. Y'all are right back here. Oops, thought we had gotten you out of that.
Yeah.
We're right back here." And I think we all have guides if we can be still, get out of the way, and let them come and allow them to talk.
Yeah. Speaking of new space, do you find yourself writing more in response? Like, are you feeling more in these times? And when I say these times, I mean our president, the blatancy of like racism and just, you know, just people not being kind to each other and you know, do you is that inspiring you to?
Well, it's a hard question because it's draining me.
Yeah.
The energy is a huge, all of this is a huge energy drain. And I think we're all collectively tired. We're collectively worn out.
Yeah.
Everybody is holding their breath and waiting for the next shoe to drop. I think now more than ever the poet is necessary. The poet voice is so important in this flow. It's so important to offer hope, to offer resiliency, a new type of resiliency, to help erect bridges where we all can stand on across all of our boundaries of gender, race, ethnicity, class, you know. So the poet, I think, has a unique, special role, as creativity has always had, because we also know that who do they come from first?
Yeah.
The thinkers, the magic makers, the philosophers, you know. And so it's hard to say, am I inspired? I think I am compelled to speak. And as Audre Lorde has always said, and it's never without fear.
Yeah.
Because right now you don't even know who you're fearing. We don't even know what we're fearing so much.
Yeah.
We know the face of something,
Yeah.
but we have no idea what this is.
Oh my gosh. It's just so blatant and in your face. And in a way, that's a blessing, because it's like, you know, who you're facing.
Well,
and you
we
know
do and we
who
don't.
to support and who not to support.
You
But
know what I
then,
mean?
Yeah.
Because I believe that many people who voted for Trump are now trying to be allies.
Yeah.
And are stepping forth, you know, with their own new agenda. But you voted for Trump.
Right. Yeah.
You can't be my ally.
Right. Yeah.
So my thing is like,
feel you there.
you go fix this.
Right.
I'm good. I'm going to make soup.
Yeah.
I'm going to take care of the babies. I'm going to talk to the elders. I'm going to write poems.
Yeah. Oh my God, that thing on there was a company that made shirts and bags that said slavery gets
Yes.
shit done.
Yes, I
And that's
posted
in-
that this morning.
That's in what, the UK, a company based in the UK, and you think,
But it's a company here as well.
is it?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's just
It's Amazon.
disturbing.
It's Amazon Prime.
It's so disturbing.
They were being sold on Amazon Prime.
That's insane.
So sort of pushing like, well, who made them? People were sort of defending Amazon. It's like, but you distributed them.
right. Why are you
It's
not
called,
checking?
you are part of
Yeah.
the branding
Yeah,
process of
you're
this.
part of the problem. Yeah.
So racism is a very viable economic commodity right now, just like drugs were at one time. It's an economic viable commodity that's being branded, and it's going out.
Yeah.
And you have a consumer base
Yeah.
that is ripe for the taking.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely
And people are not afraid to put on their badges of racism.
right.
It is no longer the KKK.
Yeah.
It is the hipster in a cool T-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the sort of H&M. Yeah. 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 It's just, I don't know. Sometimes it's like I get so frustrated, and you hear, black men, black boys getting killed by cops, black women getting killed by cops, and you're like, okay, this is where the justice is going to happen, and it never does. And it's like you're screaming and pointing to this injustice, but it doesn't happen. How do you keep that voice alive so you don't get the fatigue and give up? You know what I mean? It's just...
Yeah. I don't have the answers, but this is what works for me and keeps me healthy
Yeah.
and keeps me thriving. Is building community. Is building sincere, authentic community. Knowing who my tribe is.
Yeah.
And I have to scratch in my little piece of the world. I can't save the world,
Right.
but I might be able to save my world. If there's a 14-year-old in my neighborhood who is walking around with T-shirts on that might suggest that he's a skinhead, but he's 2 doors away from me, and I see him. I've paid him money to do some work
Right.
in the backyard.
Yeah.
I need to build community with him. I don't want to use the word save, but I might be able to give him a different perspective.
Absolutely. Influence. In a way.
So I've often been really, really annoyed when young white college students come to my house canvassing for black candidates. And I get annoyed because, one, I'm a Democrat. You know that week before you come. Go home. Go to these little small towns where you come from, where you escaped, where you feel like you've escaped the racism and all the other isms. No, you didn't escape. Go home, and you need to talk to Uncle Buck.
Yeah.
You know, Uncle Buck, the one you don't like, the one who still uses the N-word, the one who's racist, sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, the one who scares the crap out of you.
Yeah.
Go talk to him. I got this.
Yeah.
I got this.
Right.
Go do your work in your village.
Yeah.
Now, thank you. I'm glad that we're allies for the same cause. But I need you to work in your village because Jackie Shelton Green can't come to your little hamlet.
Right.
She can't knock on Uncle Buck's door.
Right. And you have more inroads, right? You have a relationship with this person that
That's your family.
Yeah. So you would be able to influence a whole lot
Yeah.
easier than a complete stranger.
Deal with your tribe.
Yeah.
Deal with your peeps. Always ask people, who do you belong to? If the people that you belong to, if you feel like they're not doing the right thing that's in the best interest of humanity, talk to them.
Yeah.
If you want to call yourself a social activist.
Yeah.
At least try and start the conversation, the dialogue. Stand up in your own truth.
Yeah.
Too many of my friends, who are really good people, But in the same breath, they'll say, oh, but you know, my dad is a rabid racist.
Yeah.
I don't talk to him.
Yeah.
And I don't know, because I'm not in that scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we work on communication?
It's hard.
I know.
I would say I'm very fortunate that the majority of my close family we're of the same cloth. You know what I mean? We are, you know, supportive advocates. We are liberal, and you know, there are, I guess, you know, some family members that we love each other, but yeah, we aren't on the same page, and it is uncomfortable to have the conversations. When you don't have the conversation, it's a little, it's comfortable to ignore it, but it's totally uncomfortable, and it's like maybe being uncomfortable is what's necessary. It's definitely hard to kind of just get out there and have that first conversation, but it's got to happen. You got to be uncomfortable, otherwise you're just complacent and let it happen.
And we are rearing generations.
Yeah.
You know, my grandmother used to tell me when I was young, in terms of racism, she said, honey, don't worry your pretty little head. She said, when all of these old heads like me die, black and white, she said, it's going to be a new day. She said, racism is going to go with us to the grave. What she failed to remember, and she knew this, is that they had spawned seeds.
Right.
That they cultivated.
Right.
That they were training.
Yeah.
I think what is the most disappointing and frightening and sad experience for me is when I meet children who are vehemently racist.
Right.
Children.
They don't know any better.
They
are
know.
learning from their
Children.
peoples. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Children.
It's very sad.
When I used to attend Klan rallies, because I felt like it was my own, I had this personal, probably.
You attended the Confederate flag thing in Hillsborough.
Yeah. I've always felt like I needed to bear witness to show up. I did this for many years. And I would get under a tree. I'd sit under a tree with my journal. And I'd just sit there and just look around, listen, and I'd write poems. But one of the things that would happen at those Klan rallies, the Klan women could not keep their eyes off of me. They were like sneaking, taking looks, and if I met their eyes, they would, you know, abruptly turn. But they were fascinated with me. I never got any hostility from them.
Right.
I never got any funky energy from them.
Yeah.
And their children, their little children who would be hanging on to their skirt tails, hiding behind them, I would play hide and seek with them all day. And if the mom looked down to see what they were doing, I would act like, you know, I'm not playing with your kid. And the minute she turned away, but they knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
They knew. They did not stop their children. And I often thought, who are these little people now? How many of these rallies have you been dragged to?
Yeah.
I saw you at 3. Are you still going at 33?
Yeah.
Who did you become?
Yeah.
Because we are making our people in terms of the mindsets, the values, you know, the discernment or lack of that we're teaching.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, one of the hardest things during the election, I had a residency in an elementary school, and kids wanted to write that day about the election. So they were just like, it was horrible. They were just like calling Donald Trump all kinds of names and writing these like really awful but fabulous poems about it. And I'm trying to keep a straight face. And there was the sole child in the class. And I adored this little boy. He said, Miss Jackie? And I said, yes. And he said, can I tell you a story? And I went, yes. He said, last night, he said, my mom let me stay up all night for the elections. I said, she did. And he said, we didn't go to bed. He said, when Donald Trump won, he said, we were so happy.
Oh,
He said, we were dancing and screaming, just me and her. And we were just hugging each other. We were crying. We were so happy. And he said, I just wanted to share that with you. And I said, I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And all the other kids were like, what? No! Fifth graders.
Wow.
It was a teachable moment. What I had to say to them, he has a right to his joy. We don't take his joy away from him. That's his truth. That's his truth. Any more than I censored your poems of anti-Trump. I said, so I celebrate his joy. It's his joy. He's a fifth grader like you. You really don't even know what you're writing about or talking about.
Yeah.
And I take that back because they were very critical. They'd had an election, a mock election at the school. Donald Trump did not win.
Right.
They wrote essays, and these essays were factual.
Yeah.
And they were so full of compassion, you know, and fear was real when you have immigrant children coming to school and they're a nervous wreck and they're in the principal's office crying because they're screaming and crying. What if they take my mom today?
Yeah.
I'm so afraid we're going to go home from school one day and everybody's going to be gone. Grandma, daddy, mama, everybody's going to disappear. Kids praying. What do we do if they take our friends? Because they want answers too.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us stay at this, whatever this is, for the children.
Yeah, absolutely.
For a legacy of hope, for a legacy of some renewed resiliency, some brand of compassion that we don't know or we've forgotten we know.
Yeah.
So that's what makes it all, the work, the hard work, the tiredness. I'm 65 years old. I'm tired.
Yeah. You know, I think with the election, Donald Trump didn't win because a lot of people voted for him. He won because a lot of people didn't vote. And for me, it's don't let that voice get tired and stay focused. Sometimes I feel like people who are on the same page are fighting with each other because it's like, oh, well, you're not doing it the right way, or you aren't considering every little thing. And it's like, okay, maybe they're not. Educate them, but don't silence them because they're fighting and they have good passion and fire, and y'all are wanting the same goal, you know. So I mean, that to me, you know, I hope that this past year encourages people to continue to speak up and not just get so complacent. And because, you know, I feel like sometimes I get in my bubble where it's like we're all on the same page and I align myself with people who are thinking the same thing because it feels good. You know, and for a long time I grew up in the country. I was a different person living in a place that didn't accept me for being who I was. And so for the longest time I grew up in that environment, and I grew up in spite of that environment. And so now it's like, as an adult, it definitely feels better for me to find my tribe, so to speak, and to ensure that my children are being raised up in that.
Exactly.
But then I get worried because it's like, are we raising fighters and speakers and leaders because we want them to continue to fight the good fight and be able to speak up, you know. And I hear you. The other side of that for me is many people did vote for Trump. Yeah. And I hope that the American public is alarmed. Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, by how many people did vote for him. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of complacency. People have just given up. But a lot of people did vote for him. Yeah. And even those who didn't vote for him, but still espouse his values and who are hate mongers,
you know, that's why I said it's important for me. Yes, I have a tribe. I know who they are. But I do put myself in uncomfortable situations with people.
Yes.
I do take those risks.
That's inspiring to me.
Because that person has humanity. That person is human. Many years ago, I was on the highway driving from my home, I think, to Chapel Hill. So it was a few years ago because I haven't driven, because my hands are crippled, I haven't driven since 2011. Am I saying that right? Yeah, I haven't driven since 2011. So going down 40 or 85, I think 40, and I see this truck that's driving pretty erratically. And I'm thinking, either that person is drunk or that person is on his cell phone or something's wrong. Because he was just like, and luckily there were no cars coming. So finally, the truck just like slowed down, and it just like kind of went off the highway. And as I approached it, I saw this man go, like his head just fell forward. And it was an old truck. On the back of the truck were all of these really bad bumper stickers.
Yeah.
White supremacy, take back our country, guns forever. I mean, just all, it was loaded. You can even see the bumper stickers. So he fell forward. Well, I hurriedly got off the highway, pulled over behind him. I jumped out. I ran to his truck. He was an older white man, like literally, I knew something was wrong. He was like sweating, and there was something coming out of his mouth.
Oh.
So but he must have known what he was doing, because he managed to put the car into, the park. So I jumped in the passenger side, under the seatbelt, and he starts screaming at me, calling me all kinds of names. Get out of my truck! And just going on and on and on. And he's sick. And I said, I need you to shut up. I think you're having a stroke or a heart attack.
Right.
And this foam was just coming out of him. So, and he was just sweating profusely. He grabbed my hand. He was holding on for dear life. I just laid his head on my lap. I called 911. 911 got there, and he was having a heart attack. And they had to pry his hand out of my hand.
Wow.
I mean, he was just holding on to me. And he wouldn't, his eyes were locked with mine. And the whole time I was holding his hand, I kept saying, it's going to be okay. I didn't know if he was going to die with his head on my lap or not. And all I knew to say to him was, I just kept stroking his forehead, and I just kept saying, it's okay, it's all right. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to leave you alone. They're coming. Help is coming. Ambulances got there. They got him. They literally had to just take his hand. And he was trying to mumble. He's still like focused on me. And I went over to the stretcher and I said, they're going to take you to the hospital. You're going to be okay. Wow. You're going to be fine.
Wow. You saved his life.
Yeah, so they do a police report. Paramedic says to me, he says, you probably saved his life.
Wow.
He said, but did you see all that stuff on his back of his truck? I said, yeah, I saw it. And he said, and you still stayed here with him? I said, yeah. He said, you're better than me. I wouldn't have done it if I were a black person seeing all that stuff. He was like, why? I said, because he's a human being. Yeah. This could have been me, or one of my children, or my husband, or anybody I know and love. I would like to think someone's humanness kicked in.
Right.
So I said, that's why I'm here. Yeah. A few months later, maybe about 6 months later, I got a phone call one day from a young woman, and she's like, is this Miss Shelton Green? And I went, yes, it is. And she's like, she starts crying, and she says, my name is so-and-so. And she said, you saved my daddy's life out on the highway a few months ago. And I was kind of like in this, I was like, huh? And she's like, my father was in a truck. I was like, oh, I said, how is he? And she said, he's doing okay. She said, he was in rehab. She said, he's doing okay. She said, but we've been trying to find you ever since this happened to thank you. He said, my daddy said you saved his life, and he know you saved his life. And he said, and she said, and we're just so grateful for what you did. And she said, but my daddy told me to tell you the bumper stickers are gone.
Oh, wow. The power of just
And she was crying.
being kind.
And she said, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
She said, I am so sorry. You know, she said, I know what, she said, those were some nasty bumper stickers. She said, and you stayed.
Yeah.
I said, well, your dad's a human being and I'm a human being. I said, so we're done here. I said, give your father my greetings and tell him I wish him Godspeed in his recovery. So
That is an amazing moment for him and for you.
when we show up, when we walk our talk, when we show up
Yeah.
in our own humanness, I think it's very, very differently. If you know how to show up in your own humanness, if you have self-love first, then you're capable of stepping out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not going to deny health care or food or shelter to someone who does not think like I do.
Right. Yeah. Wish everybody felt that way. Yeah.
Now, do I have very revolutionary thoughts? Yes. Am I sick and tired of racism? Yes. But these are those little things that I talk about. And to me, that wasn't very little. It was major. Because who do I know? How many stories he told his story to?
Right.
Who is his tribe?
Yeah.
People like him.
Yeah.
Maybe he changed nobody.
Yeah.
Maybe he changed only his children or his wife. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
But when we speak in those spaces, when we show up in those spaces, when we're able to be as transparent in our own humanness, you know, I think that's a good a place as any to start.
Yeah.
You know, it's one poem at a time. It's one conversation at a time.
That's a beautiful story. I know we've talked a lot about Trump and this past year and the climate of politics and all of that, but I wanted to talk to you about Sister Right
Yeah.
and Morocco.
Yeah, so Sister Right is a business that I started for myself. I think you know I was very ill for a number of years. I had Lyme disease that went undiagnosed for an entire year. I laid in Duke Hospital for 30 days. I lost 69 pounds. They sent me home to die. Of course, they never tested for Lyme disease. They were obsessed with finding cancer because my daughter had just recently died from cancer. And their exact words were, regretfully, we did not find any cancer. She maybe has 4 months to live. This is what they said to my husband. Keep her comfortable.
Oh my gosh.
But we don't know what else to do for her. So long story short, I was led to a holistic doctor who facilitated my healing, who helped me to recover. But when I was in that wheelchair and thinking about how to reinvent myself, how to reinvent my life, because the literary community as I knew it was like moving fast by me. And I didn't know if I had a place, a space anymore. And I started to think about what else could I do? What other passion related to writing could I generate for myself that also was revenue making? So I started thinking about, for years I wanted to provide writing retreats for women. And I had been to enough of my own over many years of writing retreats where I spent a lot of money, took vacation time, and I knew what I didn't want it to be.
Right.
I didn't want it to be workshoppy.
Right.
I didn't want it to be like a conference. I didn't want to charge somebody $1,300 just to come, but that did not include their lodging and their food, and just advertise, we provide gourmet breakfast and lots of wine. So I'd looked at these residencies myself, ones that I'd wanted to go to, and I'd start doing the math and like, okay, I'm at $4,500 already.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include how I'm going to get to the desert
Right.
from the airport, which is 3.5 hours away. Right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to provide the space, a safe, nurturing, inspirational space where women could come,
Yeah.
put a pause in their lives, and work on their creativity.
And accessible to many women, not just those
Accessible
that make
to
enough
many
money.
women.
Yes.
So, all of my retreats and one-day pop-up sessions are very affordable, and Ocracoke is our hub. So we do Ocracoke twice a year. We go in November typically, and we go in late March or early April. And being at Ocracoke, when it's naked, when it's cold and the wind is
less
really
touristy.
brewing.
Yeah.
There's nobody around but the
Yeah.
locals, the permanent tourists.
Yeah.
And it's just a very nurturing place to be. And we stay in a really funky older bed and breakfast that's not your typical beach house. It's really sweet. It's like being at your grandma's house.
I love it.
Yeah, very comfortable. And the house sleeps 7. And we just have a fabulous time. I provide meals the entire time. I love to cook. So there's no chip and dip stuff going on.
Right.
But very nurturing, gourmet, organic meals. And the trip to Morocco. So last year I was invited by the International Cultural Center of Thought in Marrakesh to be one of the keynotes at an international prose poetry symposium.
Wow.
So I went there and loved the conference, but stayed with our friends in a very small village on the Intercoastal International Highway, fishing village. And we saw a lot of Morocco.
Yeah.
And the culture, the people was just so what I needed on so many levels. Very inexpensive way of life. Of course, my friend who's a public teacher makes about $400 a month.
Wow.
But his monthly expenses are $150. His rent for a fabulous 1-bedroom apartment that's pretty huge is $100.
Wow.
And he lives off $50. And he's happy and content and sends the rest of the money to his family. So he started kind of planting the seed. You should really do Sister right here. My family has a house in another village, in the village where he comes from.
Wow,
and
your family has a...
his family,
Oh,
my
his
friend's
family,
family.
okay.
So he's like our adopted son now.
Oh, nice.
He's an amazing poet, writer. He's
He
working
came
on
to
his...
visit here,
Yes, he's
didn't
been
he?
here several
Yeah.
times and spent the summer with us here last summer. Was here summer before last with us. And his family, his parents own a house in a mountain village in the Atlas Mountains, a very distinct Berber village. And they're making that house available as a permanent Sister Right space for me.
Wow.
So I can go there anytime. Or
That's
we can go there as
amazing.
family. Or I can,
Yeah.
So in June and July, there will be 2 groups of women coming from the U.S., coming for a residency.
What's the landscape like? Like, to give people an idea.
It is rugged mountains.
Uh-huh.
The name of the village is Ait Baha. And it's even hard to find on.
Is it
on a
like
map.
deserty type mountains? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, olive trees and argon.
But they have amazing food and amazing.
The food is, oh my God. So we will have a cook the entire time, a housekeeper for our house, and we will travel. We will do a lot of traveling. I do want to stress that many women who are not writers come to Sister Write. Women who have any creative intent or process. A friend who's a sculptor has come.
Yeah.
A woman who works in iron, she's an iron sculptor, has come. People who work with textile craftspeople have come, because they too are also looking for the narrative in that particular art form, be it quilting or forging metal. So we have wonderful creativity salons every evening. As I said, it's not workshoppy. This is an opportunity for women to have space, to define what that space looks like for themselves, to take control of it without a phone call from the school or the cell phone ringing, or or having to do anything.
Yes, it's completely.
If you need to
for
sleep,
them. Yeah.
if your thing is you need to sleep an entire day before you can fully show up, then that's what you do. But we like to think of it as writing together alone. So I've created all of these spaces where women have space to go off. And you may not be writing. You might be walking on the beach. You might be sitting on the porch having a cup of tea. You may be sitting with another person in the backyard, or you might be in a hammock. It's what you need. It's how you define this retreat. So I see my role as a facilitator, creativity coach, is providing the space, providing the physical nurturance, and making sure that it's a really high quality, emotional, spiritual, literary experience for you.
Do you find, in your experience with these retreats, do you find that, women who come to it, they kind of connect and electrify each other with
Yes. The sisterhood is amazing. The thing about Sister Write, there's no pretense, there's no judgment, there are no egos. I mean, truly, people do not come with, oh, well, I have 6 books. There might be a very seasoned writer there who becomes very close to someone who's not published one thing.
Wow, nice.
So when we come there as women, as sisters, as women, really wanting to build community, wanting to hear the stories, the pathways, the journey to writing, or the journey, to creativity. We talk about what's holding us hostage.
Yeah.
And how do we remove the things that are holding us hostage so we can show up fully in our work and our creativity. So I mean, it's just so magical to see these communities happen. Some of the outcomes have been women come back and create their own little writing groups without me,
Right.
which is fabulous.
Yeah.
They come back and they're visiting each other and emailing each other work to critique without me in the mix. So we're continually creating these tiers of support for each other, peer support. And I just love seeing that happen. It's very intergenerational. This year there's a 19-year, I think she's about 19-year-old, and she's coming. She'll be the youngest amongst us.
Oh, nice.
It's very diverse. Muslims, Christians, Jews, white women, black women, Asian women. We're just such a mixed bag. And so the sisterhood is powerful within Sister Write. And there are women who've never missed, who've come to every Sister Write retreat that I've offered, regardless where it is. Some of them are coming to Morocco. But I have a series that's called Writing in Places That Matter. And one of the places we went to write was at the Anne Spencer House Museum up in Lynchburg, Virginia.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Anne Spencer was a Harlem Renaissance poet,
Yeah.
whose house was the hub for Langston Hughes, for Zora Neale Hurston. I was invited to be the first writer in residence in that house after Zora Neale Hurston.
Wow.
So this house is magical.
Yeah.
It has its own stories and spirits and ghosts, and so we continue to just try and thrive. And I'm constantly kind of scouting other places, and now that people know who we are, people write me and say, hey, I have this cabin in West Virginia. It sleeps 10. You're welcome to it. You should bring a bunch of women up.
Oh, that's great.
You know, people have been begging me to come to Martha's Vineyard. This summer I was on the Jersey Shore in New Jersey, researching and in communication with a sister friend there who would like to co-sponsor a Sister Right retreat there. So it's growing.
I love it. I can't
It's
wait. I hope
growing.
one year I can go to Morocco with you.
You have to come.
I know.
But the house is there. We don't have to wait for
I
a
know.
Sister
So
Right.
it sounds great.
I mean, you can just
Yeah.
like go. You want to go? Can I go?
Let's go, Jackie.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, and that comes back to these people embraced me as family and community.
You are an easy spirit to let in.
Thank you.
You. It feels very comfortable to be around.
Well, they
you.
definitely let us in,
Yeah.
and we're going to stay in, and it's also a wonderful way for me to give to a Berber family who I know has a hard time making ends meet.
Yeah.
These are not wealthy people.
Right.
They're agrarian, you know, very extended community, and you know, we're not going to a 5-star hotel.
Yeah.
We're not going to, you know, like, so I'm going to have a lot of meetings with these women because I want to make sure that people know where they're going.
Yeah.
And like one day if there's no hot water, it's like, it's really not that serious, y'all.
Right.
It's summer.
Yes.
Like, yep, it's a village.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so there are just a lot of adaptations and cultural nuances that we'll discuss. Before we leave here, I'm having several potlucks. And people who are coming from other states, you know, we'll have some video chats to make sure that people, you know, I don't want people to get there like, oh, this is not what I was expecting. Ha.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean like there's no room service? No.
Well, speaking of space, I wanted to invite you, if you wanted to read something to close us out so that people can hear your voice.
All
and
right.
if they're not familiar with
Okay.
Jaki Shelton Green.
Okay. I'm going to read this poem. So, as you know, one of the things that I do is I work with non-traditional writers and marginalized writers. And for many years, I've done residencies with women on death row. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote out of that experience. For 1 year, I did a residency with women where the assignment was the only thing they could write about were their hands. That's all they could write about. So for an entire year, we only wrote about our hands. And I wanted these women on death row to think about the power of their own hands and what permissions they granted those hands that had landed them on death row, what those hands had been deprived of, you know, visualizing the last time you touched your daughter's cheek. You know, what does that feel like, your hands? You know, your daughter's now 13, you've not seen her since she was 3. The last time you brushed her hair. So I wrote my own poem about hands. And because I do, like we talked about, I go deep into a container of memory, and most of that is out of a reverence for family. And so this is a poem I wrote for my grandmother. I know the grandmother one had hands. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in bowls, folding, pinching, rolling the dough, making the bread. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always underwater, sifting rice, bluing clothes, starching lives. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always in the earth, planting seeds, removing weeds, growing knives, burying sons. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always under the cloth, pushing it along, helping it birth into skirt, dress, curtains to lock out night. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the hair, parting, plaiting, twisting it into rainbows. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside pockets, holding the knots, counting the twisted veins, holding unto herself, lest her hands disappear into sky. I know the grandmother one had hands, but they were always inside the clouds,